You can ask me the question again. I will answer it the same way, and this time there are 40 cameras. You do not own this floor, Miss Henry. No, I own the building. He was 29 years old, and he ran the largest indoor entertainment centers in the country. Buildings engineered to hold 4,000 screaming people at once, and he could not stand inside one of them after 6 in the evening without his hands going cold. So he visited at 7:40 in the morning, alone, with the machines dark. That was the arrangement he had made with his own body, and he had kept it a secret for 14 months. Then a 30-year-old American au pair from a housing project outside Albany, Georgia walked into the VIP lounge of a ski resort operator in Myeongdong, sending every paycheck she earned back to a family whose farm the creditors had already taken, and she looked at him for exactly 11 seconds and said nothing at all. She did not need to. She had loved him once, years ago, and she had vanished the day he chose his family's company over her. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that it became the safest place to stand? Stay with this one, because a retired housekeeper deciding to humiliate her in front of a press pool is only the beginning, and this story does not end the way you think it will. Be honest with me. If this story got you somewhere in the chest, drop a comment and tell me exactly where it happened. I will be right there in the comments with you. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for staying to the very end. I will see you in the next one. So tell me now, before we go back, would you have stayed quiet? 7 weeks before the cameras, in the Seongbuk-dong Hills above Seoul, a woman was awake at 5:20 in the morning, ironing 2 school uniforms she had already ironed the night before. Elizabeth Henry, 30 years old, 5'9", raised on the 9th floor of a housing project unit in a rural South Georgia town outside Albany, close enough to the shuttered textile mill that she grew up thinking of it as a mountain range. A long, low shape on the horizon that had employed her grandmother, her mother, and 2 of her aunts, and then employed no one at all. She had been an au pair for 4 years. 2 families in Paris, 1 in Singapore, and now this one. The household of a Korean family whose name was printed on 60% of the arcade cabinets in the country. Her salary was 3,200,000 won a month. She sent 2,900,000 of it home on the 2nd of every month, standing in the same bank branch in Anguk, filling out the same form by hand because the app rounded the exchange rate in a way she did not like. The remaining 300,000 covered her phone, her bus card, and a pair of shoes twice a year. Her father's land, 74 acres of peanut and cotton outside Albany, had gone to creditors 26 months earlier, and the money she sent now went to the rented house he lived in and to her mother's insulin. She had never once mentioned any of that inside the house where she worked. This is what she was good at, and I want you to understand it before anything else happens. She was good at noticing. Within 11 days of arriving, she knew that the older child, a boy of 9, would not eat if anyone watched him, and that the younger, a girl of 6, would lie about a stomachache when what she actually wanted was to be carried. She knew that the family's driver took the long route on Thursdays because his mother's clinic was on that road. She knew the housekeeper's shift change happened at 2, and that the kitchen ran out of hot water at 2:15 every single day. So she bathed the children at 1:40. Nobody had told her any of it. She simply watched, the way people watch when being wrong is expensive. At the estate, the woman who noticed her noticing was Camilla Olson. Camilla had retired 6 years earlier. This did not stop her from arriving Tuesdays and Fridays at 8:15 in a pressed gray cardigan with her own set of keys, which no one had ever asked her to return. She was American, from somewhere outside Baltimore, and she had come to the family at 24 as a nanny and left 31 years later as head housekeeper. And in between, she had built something that did not appear on any organizational chart. She knew which cousin was in debt. She knew which marriages were arrangements. She knew where the family kept the second set of ancestral tablets, and she knew that the matriarch could not sleep without the hallway light at the north end of the house left on. Power in that house did not run through the office in Yowido. It ran through a woman with keys, and she did not like Elizabeth Henry. Not for anything Elizabeth had done. For the arithmetic of it. In 3 weeks, the children had started calling for Elizabeth instead of the kitchen, and the matriarch had asked Elizabeth twice about the weather in Georgia, and once, at a family lunch, had laughed at something Elizabeth said. Camila had spent 31 years earning the ability to make that woman laugh. Newcomers are a kind of weather. Some people would rather burn the house down than admit the season changed. The first thing was small. The grandmother's 80th birthday was set for a Saturday in a private room of a restaurant in Cinza, 40 people, and Elizabeth had spent 3 weeks helping the children prepare calligraphy scrolls, 1 character each, the boy's hand steady and the girl's hand catastrophic and beautiful. The scrolls were to be presented after the soup. It was the whole point of the children's evening. It was the only thing in the entire event that no money had paid for. On Friday afternoon, Camila mentioned to a junior housekeeper that the scrolls in the front hall looked as though they were collecting dust and should be put somewhere safe. On Saturday, at the restaurant after the soup, Elizabeth opened the tote bag and found 2 folded aprons. So what did she do? She stood up, put a hand on each child's back, and told the room, in the careful Korean she had been studying for 90 minutes a night for 7 months, that her charges had written something for their grandmother and would like to say it out loud. The boy recited his character and what it meant. The girl forgot hers and said the word for turtle instead, which was not on any scroll, and 40 people laughed, and the grandmother laughed hardest of all and reached across the table for the girl's hands. Elizabeth sat down. Across the room, in a chair no one had assigned her, Camilla Olsen smoothed her cardigan. Nothing had been proven. Nothing could be. An hour later, in the hallway by the coats, Camilla said, warmly, so that 2 of the family's cousins could hear, "You must be so relieved. I know how flustered you get with the details." Elizabeth said, "Thank you for keeping them somewhere safe." That took a kind of courage most people never learn, and it cost her something, and nobody in that hallway saw the cost. Because this is what she could not say, and did not say, and would not say for weeks. She could not be dismissed. A dismissal meant a flight home, and a flight home meant the 2nd of the month arriving with nothing to send, and it meant her mother doing the arithmetic on a vial of insulin. Every insult she swallowed had a number attached to it, 2,900,001. She was the least powerful adult in that house, and she knew exactly how far she could be pushed, which is a different thing from not minding. In Gangnam, at 7:40 on a Tuesday morning, in a building engineered to hold 4,000 people, a man stood alone in the dark. Chundeok Shim was 29 years old. The floor under him was 41,000 square feet of polished concrete, and it held 610 machines, and every one of them was switched off, and he had asked for it that way. He walked the perimeter first, the way he always did, counting exits, then the center aisle. Then he stopped by the racing cabinets and stood there for 3 minutes, doing nothing at all, because at 7:40 the room was just architecture, and architecture had never frightened anyone. At 6 in the evening the same room made his hands go cold. Not metaphorically. The blood left his fingers, his jaw locked, and a sound like a wave began somewhere behind his ears, and he had learned to hold a glass in his left hand at those events so that no one would notice the right one shaking. He had been managing it for 14 months. His schedule was built around it, the way a city is built around a river. Site visits at 7:40. Investor dinners in private rooms with a door he could see. Grand openings attended for 22 minutes, and then a car. He had told no one. Not his father, who had put his name on the arcade cabinets. Not his sister. Not the doctor in Cheongdam, who thought he came in about his sleep. The only place he had ever felt the wave go quiet was a Hanok library retreat near Suncheon Bay, where his family had sent him at 16 to study for a year. A low wooden building with 3 rooms and no other students, where the loudest sound in a day was the reeds. He had hated it then. He thought about it now roughly once an hour. That Tuesday, walking out past the dark price counter, his sister called about the birthday and complained about the arrangements, and mentioned in passing that the new au pair had saved the whole thing, an American, quick, and something about a turtle. He asked what her name was. He would tell you he asked, because he asks everyone's name. And he was 29 years old, and he had been lying to himself in small ways for 14 months. So, what is one more? In Myeongdong, on a Thursday, 5 weeks later, on the 22nd floor, the ski resort operator held its investor lounge for the winter season, and Elizabeth Henry was brought along to keep the children quiet in a side room. She had not been told to enter the main lounge. She had been told, by Camila, that the children's coats were being held at the front desk of the lounge and that she should go get them herself, now, during the presentation, in her plain black work dress, in front of the family's business partners. A small, cheap arrangement. A woman in service clothes walking through a room of people in cashmere, so that everyone would place her correctly and remember it. Elizabeth understood the assignment perfectly. She straightened her collar in the elevator glass and walked in anyway, past the champagne, past the model of the gondola line, past a wall of glass with the whole lit spine of the city behind it. And then she stopped, because he was standing 14 feet away with a glass in his left hand. 7 years since she had seen him. 7 years since the afternoon she had stood in a doorway in Ilsan and listened to him choose his family's company and then walked out of the country without leaving so much as a note, because pride, as always, was cheaper than begging. She looked at him for exactly 11 seconds. She said nothing at all. And Chundeok Shim, who read rooms the way other men read weather, who had made a career out of knowing what people wanted 4 seconds before they asked, felt his hands go cold at 7:12 in the evening for a reason that had nothing whatsoever to do with the crowd. In the Myeongdong lounge on the 22nd floor, Chundeok Shim did 3 things in the space of 6 seconds, and only one of them was visible. He set his glass down on a passing tray. He put both hands in his trouser pockets, which was not a posture anyone had ever photographed him in, because it hid what his right hand was doing. And he crossed the room. He stopped 4 feet from her, which was closer than he stopped for anyone. "The coats are at the second desk," he said, "not the front one. The front desk only holds bags." Elizabeth Henry did not move. "Thank you." "Somebody told you the front desk?" "Yes." "During the presentation." He let that sit. So the room would see the dress. Now, understand what he had just done. He had taken a small cruelty that was designed to be invisible, and he had said it out loud in a flat voice, like reading a number off a page, and in doing that he had made it worthless. A humiliation only works if everyone agrees to pretend it was an accident. She looked at the floor for a moment, then back up. "The children are in the side room," she said. "They will be looking for me." That was all. She got the coats from the second desk, and she walked out past the model of the gondola line, and she did not look back, and 40 people in Kashmir had already gone back to the winter projections. He stood there, with his hands in his pockets, until the elevator number stopped moving. 7 years. He had spent some part of almost every week of those 7 years constructing an explanation for why she had gone, and every explanation had been about him. And standing in that lounge, he understood in one clean stroke that she had not been thinking about him at all when she left. She had been thinking about how much a plane ticket cost. In the car back to Seongbuk-dong, Elizabeth sat between 2 sleeping children with a coat over each knee. She did not let herself feel any of it until the car was on the bridge. Not the shock, not the old thing, the low, embarrassing warmth that arrived the instant she saw the way he held a glass. What she felt, when she finally let herself feel anything, was fury, and it was not aimed at Camilla Olsen. It was aimed at the fact that he had looked at her for 6 seconds and known exactly what had been done to her, and that in 7 years nobody else ever had. She put her head back against the seat. The girl shifted and pushed a warm foot into her thigh. On the 2nd of the month, Elizabeth went to the bank branch in Anguk and filled out the transfer form by hand, 2,900,000 won. Same as always. Then she went to the second window, the one for business accounts, and handed over a folder and signed her name on a line that had a title printed under it. And the teller called her something other than her name, and Elizabeth said thank you and left. That took 9 minutes. We will come back to those 9 minutes. At the estate, on Tuesday at 8:15, Camilla Olson arrived in the pressed gray cardigan and learned from the driver that Chundeok Shim had crossed an investor lounge to speak to the au pair. She did not react in front of him. She hung her coat, checked the flowers, and went down to the laundry, and by 9 she was pleasant again. Then things began going wrong in a row. On Wednesday, the girls' kindergarten had a culture day, and Elizabeth had spent 2 evenings letting out the seams of a hanbok jacket so it would fit through the winter. On Tuesday night, the jacket went to the cleaners. Nobody had asked for it to go to the cleaners. It came back Thursday, one day after it was needed, wrapped beautifully in plastic. Elizabeth walked the girl in wearing her own gray cardigan folded and pinned at the waist like a sash, and the teacher said it was clever, and the girl was happy, and the mother heard from someone that the au pair had forgotten the hanbok. On Friday, a set of place cards for a family lunch went missing from the drawer Elizabeth had put them in. She wrote 14 new ones in the pantry in 20 minutes, in Korean, in her careful hand, and got 2 of the honorifics slightly wrong, and Camilla corrected them out loud at the table. "She is learning," Camilla said fondly. "It takes years." 7 months of studying 90 minutes a night, and she was learning. Sure. And then it stopped being small. On the second Sunday, the hallway light at the north end of the house was off. The matriarch, 80 years old, and 8 days past her birthday, could not sleep without it. Everyone in that house knew it. Elizabeth knew it because she had noticed, the way she noticed everything. And she had built the light into her own bedtime, the way you build a train into a commute. At 3:40 in the morning, the old woman was found in the corridor, one hand flat on the wall, disoriented, cold to the touch. She had been there long enough that the housekeeper who found her started crying. By 8 the following morning, there was a version of events. The night list was checked at the end of every day and initialed, and the initials on Sunday's list were Elizabeth's, and the box beside the north hallway light was unchecked. Elizabeth had checked it. She remembered checking it, and she remembered the pen skipping, and she had gone back over the stroke twice. She stood in the family's front room with her hands at her sides and said, "I checked it. I do not have a way to prove that." That was the entire defense she offered. She could have said the list sat in an unlocked drawer in a hallway that Camilla Olson had keys to. She could have said that a woman of 61 with no pension, no contract, and no title left in that house had arrived Tuesday and Friday for 6 years to protect the only thing she had, and that the only thing she had was being needed. She said nothing, because an accusation from her would sound like exactly what a careless person says. The family did not dismiss her. What they did was worse in a slower way. On Wednesday, the office in Yoido requested her passport, her contract, and her visa sponsorship documents for what a very polite young man in an email called a routine review. She read that email 4 times sitting on the edge of her bed with the phone in both hands. A routine review. Her mother's insulin. The second of the month. 2,900,000 won. Have you ever held a phone and done arithmetic instead of feeling anything? That is a skill. Nobody teaches it. You learn it on the 9th floor of a building where the elevator has not worked since March. In Gangnam, at 7:40 in the morning, a request came down through the family that made no sense to anybody. Chundeok Shim's company was opening its private season for corporate partners, and as a courtesy, the children of the family whose name was printed on 60% of the arcade cabinets in the country were invited to the flagship floor before opening hours. Him personally. 7:40 in the morning. Bring whoever brings the children. The boy of 9 walked in and stopped dead, because 41,000 square feet of polished concrete in the dark looks like the bottom of an ocean. Then Chundeok Shim nodded at a man in the booth, and 610 machines came on at once. Elizabeth felt it before she heard it. The floor moved. A low physical thud came up through the soles of her shoes and into her knees and sat in her chest like a second heartbeat. And every cabinet on that floor lit its own square of color, and the girl of 6 screamed with joy and ran. Elizabeth stood very still with one hand on a railing and let the vibration go through her. "They are safe," he said beside her. "2 staff on the floor. Nothing here is over 6 feet. "I know. You counted the exits when you came in." She turned her head. "So did you." He almost smiled. It got as far as one corner of his mouth, and then he put it away. They stood there for a while and watched the children run, and there's a kind of conversation that happens in a loud room where nobody has to look at anybody, and they had one. "You are being blamed for something," he said. "I am being reviewed. For the light in the north hallway." Elizabeth's hand tightened on the railing. She had not told anyone outside that house. Not one person. "How do you know that?" "Because my sister talks. And because a house like that only has 3 or 4 things that can be used." He looked out at the floor. She is 61 years old. She left with no contract, no pension, and a set of keys nobody asked her to return. Everything she is worth in that family is stored in other people needing her. You arrived, and within 3 weeks the children stopped calling for the kitchen. He paused. She is not defending her position. She does not have one. She is defending the only version of herself she can stand. Diagnosing her does not help me. "No," he agreed. "It only tells you she will not stop." The girl came running back and grabbed Elizabeth's hand and dragged her toward a machine with a plastic hammer, and Elizabeth went. He watched her crouch down to the child's height in her plain black work dress and lose on purpose twice. Then, when she came back, he said the thing he had been carrying for 5 weeks. In the lounge. "You stood there for 11 seconds. She did not answer. "I counted," he said. "I know you did." She straightened her collar. "You count everything. It is the only reason you can stand to be in a room." And Chundeok Shim, 29 years old, who had kept a condition secret from his father, his sister, and a doctor in Cheongdam for 14 months, felt the floor of his life tilt about 2 degrees. She had known. In 6 minutes, in a lounge, 7 years later, she had known. At the estate, Camilla Olson started making phone calls. Not many. She was not a woman who needed many. One to a cousin who owed money. One to a woman she had known for 20 years who now ran hospitality at a hotel in Junggu, and one, on the Thursday, to a number saved in her phone under a first name only, a woman who wrote for a weekly magazine that covered the private lives of families whose names were printed on things. Camilla spoke for 11 minutes. She was warm the entire time. She said the word concerned 4 times. None of them knew this yet. The company's 40-year anniversary reception was set for the flagship in Myeongdong, in the resort operators building, on a Thursday evening, with 40 accredited cameras on a rope line and a live stream feed running to the trade press for the winter announcement. And there was something else none of them knew. Every quarter, a registered letter arrived for Elizabeth Henry at a post office box in Anguk from a law office in Junggu, addressed to a holding name with 2 initials in it, and she opened those letters standing up at the counter and never once carried one into the house where she worked. On the Monday before the reception, the family's mother handed Elizabeth an invitation card and asked her to bring the children for the first hour, for photographs, because the grandmother had asked for them. The card was cream and heavy, and Elizabeth's name was printed on the guest line as staff. Camilla Olson passed her in the hallway by the coats an hour later, going the other way, and she stopped, and she smoothed her cardigan, and she looked genuinely kind. "Thursday," she said. "Wear the black dress. Everyone will know exactly who you are." In Myeongdong, on a Thursday evening, in the resort operators building, where the flagship took up 2 floors, 40 accredited cameras stood behind a rope line, and a live stream feed ran to the trade press for the winter announcement. Chundeok Shim arrived at 6:52 and gave himself 22 minutes. He knew the room's numbers before he entered it. 340 guests, 4 exits, 2 of them behind service doors, ceiling at 24 feet. A sound system that would be pushed to whatever a marketing team thought celebration sounded like, which was always about 6 decibels past what a body could file away as harmless. He took a glass in his left hand from the first tray that passed him and put his right hand where the cuff covered it. At 7:04, the blood had already left his fingers and the wave had started behind his ears, and he was smiling at the head of the resort operators board and answering a question about gondola capacity, and nobody in that room had the first idea. At 7:06, Elizabeth Henry came in with a child in each hand. Black dress. Flat shoes she had bought twice a year. The girl of 6 was pulling toward the light of the machines, and the boy of 9 was walking with his shoulders up around his ears, and Elizabeth crouched, said something to him, and the shoulders came down 2 inches. At 7:11, the grandmother had her photograph taken with both children, and the old woman kept a hand on Elizabeth's forearm the whole time, which anyone paying attention would have understood as a statement. At 7:19, a woman in a red blazer came under the rope line with a microphone and a cameraman 3 feet behind her and walked straight at the au pair. "Miss Henry, a moment. There are reports that an 80-year-old woman in your care was found alone in a corridor at 3:40 in the morning, cold, disoriented." The microphone came up. "Can you tell us how that happened?" The room did not go silent. Rooms never do. But a ring of about 30 people turned, and behind the rope line lenses swung, and the live stream, which had been showing a slide about winter capacity, showed a black American woman in a service dress with 2 children holding on to her. That was the design. Elizabeth understood the design in under 2 seconds because she had spent 7 weeks studying the hand that made it. Camilla Olson was standing 11 feet away in the pressed gray cardigan, holding a glass of water she had no intention of drinking, wearing an expression of open, motherly concern. "Miss Henry, is it true the family has requested your visa documents? Is it true you were the last person to initial the night list?" Chundeok Shim set his glass down and took 1 step forward. Elizabeth put 2 fingers on his sleeve and did not look at him. "Not like this," she said. She had already decided this, days earlier, sitting on the edge of a bed with a phone in both hands. If she was ever going to be looked at properly, she was not going to be handed the room by a man. She had been handed nothing her entire life. She was not going to start with the only thing that was actually hers. She turned to the woman in the red blazer and held out her hand for the microphone. The reporter hesitated for exactly the length of time it takes to calculate how refusing looks on a live feed, and then gave it to her. "My name is Elizabeth Henry," she said. "I am 30 years old, I am the au pair for this family, and I would like to answer the question, because the question is a fair one." She sent the children to the grandmother with a small push at the small of the girl's back. On the second Sunday of last month, the hallway light at the north end of the house was off. The matriarch cannot sleep without it. She was found at 3:40 in the morning by a housekeeper who cried so hard she could not use the phone. That should never have happened, and I have thought about it every night since. Nobody breathed into that. The night list is initialed at the end of every day. Sunday's list carries my initials, and the box for that light is unchecked. I checked it. I remember the pen skipping, and I went back over the stroke twice. She paused. I cannot prove that. The reporter opened her mouth. "I can tell you some dates," Elizabeth said, and kept going, and her voice did not go up once. The grandmother's scrolls were removed from the front hall on a Friday afternoon and replaced with 2 folded aprons. A hanbok jacket I had let out by hand went to the cleaners on a Tuesday night that nobody ordered and came back one day after it was needed. 14 place cards left a drawer I had put them in and were gone on a Friday. I was told the coats at an investor lounge were at the front desk during a presentation in this dress. when the front desk only holds bags. She let 2 seconds go by. The night list sits in an unlocked drawer in a hallway in a house where one retired person still carries her own set of keys. The livestream comments, someone told her later, moved so fast the trade press could not read them. A young man from the resort operator's communications team appeared at her elbow with a handout, saying something warm about a quiet room upstairs. And 3 feet behind him, Camilla Olsen stepped in and said it gently, sadly, the way you correct a child in front of company. "You do not own this floor, Miss Henry." Elizabeth Henry looked at her for a moment. "No," she said.
"I own the building." Those 9 minutes at the bank branch in Anguk on the 2nd of every month went like this. The first window was the transfer, 2,900,000 won, filled out by hand.
The second window was for business accounts, and the folder she handed across it belonged to a holding company registered in Junggu under 2 initials, funded over 4 years out of 300,000 won a month, and 2 Paris families and 1 Singapore family and every extra hour she had ever been paid for. Leveraged with a small loan against a first property in Gwangju bought at auction 38 months earlier. Then a second, then a floor, then a fund that came in behind her because the numbers were clean. The teller called her director. The registered letters that arrived quarterly at the post office box, the ones she opened standing up at the counter and never carried into the house, were rent rolls. She did not own the floor the reception was standing on. That floor was leased for another 26 months to the resort operator. She owned the building. She had bought it 14 months ago from a family trust that needed liquidity, and the man whose company was celebrating 40 years in it had signed a renewal with a holding name and never once asked who was behind it, because why would he? She had never told him. She had gone on ironing uniforms at 5:20 in the morning because the children called for her instead of the kitchen, and because a woman who has been poor does not walk away from the only work in her life that anyone has ever thanked her for. Somebody near the rope line laughed once, the way people do when the arithmetic of a room reorganizes itself in front of them. Camilla Olsen's face did something small.
And Chundeok Shim said, quietly, into that gap, not raising his voice at all, "You made 3 calls. 1 to a cousin who owed you money. 1 to a woman you have known 20 years who runs hospitality at a hotel in Junggu. And 1 last Thursday, 11 minutes long, to a number in your phone saved under a first name." He looked at the reporter in the red blazer without unkindness. "You used the word concerned 4 times. Chundeok." Elizabeth said his name for the first time in 7 years in front of 40 cameras. "That is enough." He stopped. Then the youngest of the family's housekeepers came out from behind the photograph line, 3 feet at a time, with both hands closed, and said, in Korean, that at 10:40 on that Sunday night, she had been told to switch off the light at the north end of the house because the glare was bothering the grandmother, and that she had believed it, and that she had said nothing for 5 weeks, and that she would put it in writing tonight. Camilla Olsen said, "That is not what I," and did not finish it. She turned and walked toward the service door, and the polished thing that had lived on her face for 31 years did not come back. 340 people watched her go. Elizabeth Henry still had the microphone. "I'm not giving this to a magazine," she said. "I'm asking the office in Yeouido for a proper review with the list, the drawer, and the statement, and I will submit my own passport and contract to it, because I said I would. Nobody loses their keys tonight in front of cameras. She is 61 years old. A beat. I want the record corrected, not the woman destroyed." She handed the microphone back. Somebody, 3 lenses deep in the rope line, started clapping, which turned into the whole floor. The girl of 6 arrived at her hip and asked whether, since they were already here, they could go find the hammer machine. In Myeongdong, on the flagship floor, at 8:14 in the evening, the machines were still on, and the room had gone back to talking about winter capacity, because rooms do that. Chundeok Shim found her by the plastic hammer machine, where the girl of 6 was destroying him in absentia.
22 minutes, Elizabeth said, without looking up. You have been here 82. I noticed. Your hands? He looked at his right hand, turned it over once, and put it back in his pocket. Cold at 7:04, warm since about 7:22. What happened at 7:22? You asked the room to be fair instead of asking it to be angry. He watched the girl swing. There is a hanok near Suncheon Bay. 3 rooms, no other students. I was sent there at 16 and I hated it, and it is the only place my body has ever been quiet. A pause. I have never told anyone that either. Elizabeth Henry straightened up. She was 30 years old, she was still in the black dress, and she had 2,900,000 won going out on the second like always. 7 years ago, I stood outside a door in Ilsan, she said, before I knocked. 11 seconds. How would you know that? You were inside. I heard the floor, he said. I have thought about those 11 seconds roughly once an hour. Then he took the cream invitation card out of his jacket, the heavy one with her name printed on the guest line as staff, and he set it face up on the glass of the machine, and with a pen from the communications team, he drew one clean line through the word. Under it, in small square handwriting, he wrote, Owner, Suncheon, Sunday, 7:40 in the morning, bring the turtle. He turned it toward her and did not say anything else, and she read it twice. She had learned that being underestimated was the safest place to stand. She had learned that a woman with no leverage can still refuse to lie. She had learned that you can hold a room without ever raising your voice, if you have spent your whole life listening in one. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me whether you would have handed back the microphone the way Elizabeth did. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one.